All right, guys, what has happened? We're back again. We're back doing a review. We're back in the new studio, back in Australia, back in Burleigh. So, come back home for a little bit. We're having a bit of a reset. We have not had the best season. Definitely not the season I wanted to start with. In the 11 years of racing, I've probably only not qualified 3 or 4 times or something like that in my whole career, and that was flat tires, crashes, all that kind of stuff. And to not qualify 3 races in a row is it's pretty disheartening, to be honest. I felt good coming in, and for whatever reason just couldn't find it at Lenzerheide, which is kind of frustrating because that's a track that I've just always seemed to be able to turn it on there. I got my first podium there. I've just always had good results, always been in the top 15 pretty much. So that one had me questioning kind of where I was at and what was going on. And then going into Leo Gang, I was just like, all right, let's pull it back together. I felt good in practice. I had good speed, and then had a massive crash in my qualifying run. I don't know. It's like when you're already kind of not really feeling the best, and then you're laying on the side of a hill in pain. It's just like, again, just disheartening. It's like you put in a lot of work to kind of be there and to show up, and then when you don't do it, you feel like you're letting people down. So not the start I was hoping for to get the season kicked off. But definitely kind of, you got to take the good with the bad sometimes, and it's just kind of not knowing. Like, part of me, like, definitely feel like my heart's not quite in it like it used to be, so that's obviously playing a factor in it. But even without that, like, when I feel like I'm getting kind of a bit of a flow happening, and then I just don't seem to be able to turn it on for finals, which is something that I haven't really dealt with before. Like, I've always been the other way, where if I'm not feeling that good in practice, I knew for finals or qualifying I could kind of like pull it together. So to have that kind of go out the window now and do the opposite, where I actually ride tight and ride slower when it counts, is something that I haven't really dealt with before. So just trying to like understand that and how to kind of shake that is kind of what I'm doing now. So I'm back in Australia for a little bit now, having a bit of a reset, and just kind of figuring things out and see where the kind of future holds. Obviously finish these World Cup season and try and come out swinging when I come back over for Andorra. But see how the rest of the season goes. We've still got 5 races, so it's still a lot of racing to go, and anything can kind of happen. And obviously you get the right mindset, you get some good training in, you can show up and turn things around pretty quickly. But just want to go enjoy myself, have fun, like keep just being positive, keep going forward, and see where it takes us. But definitely not the start I wanted. But going to a little bit of a review of the World Cup we just had in Val di Sole. It's a bit late. I've just got back from Australia. I was going to do this with Eddie, but kind of it's a bit hectic as soon as you finish your race to try and like line people up and get people talking. But one of the, if not the hardest tracks of the whole entire World Cup circuit, and it did hold up pretty well. Bits deteriorated quickly, but other bits actually held up quite well. Comparing it to last year, the first day of practice felt like race day this year. So to put that in comparison, by the time we raced this year, that's where we were starting off last year. So it was a lot better. Stuff held up better. It was tricky as well because the rain kept coming in like all week. It kind of would like have little showers here and there. It didn't do a whole lot, to be honest. Like, I had showers overnight, but on race day it actually rained in the middle of downhill finals. And then this is the third year in a row where that's happened. It happened at Worlds, it happened last year, and now it happened again this year. So at about, when I say around 3 p.m, it seems to just like rain just enough, like enough that it kind of screws up the guys in the middle. But then seems once the sun comes out, it seems to dry up and actually be decent for the last guys. So it was one of those races. The first guys came down, set some pretty good times, and then the rain came and just no one else was coming close. Bernard Kerr was actually in the hot seat at the time, and you start to get those feelings of like, oh, is he won it now? And I think a lot of people were kind of thinking that and they even like seeing how Bernard's body language and stuff was when you saw him sitting there. He looked pretty comfortable, and then I think it wasn't until maybe Troy came down and started to put some time into him, you could see like the body language change, and we're like, okay, we've actually got a proper race on our hands. So it's never a good feeling as well when you're like, even if you don't want to do well because of the weather. Like, even when I was in Mont Saint Anne, when I got second to Gwyn when he won in the rain, like sitting there, it just feels like imposter syndrome in a way. And I feel like if you did win, like, you can say, oh yeah, I won a World Cup, but there's always going to have that asterisk next to your name. And I just don't think that's a good feeling. And I think it takes away from you if you were to actually win properly, because it doesn't feel like the first time, even though it kind of is. So yeah, we never like to see it when it rains and kind of blows out the results and changes things up. So it was good the sun come out. I feel for the guys that went in the rain. Like there was guys like my teammate Dylan Levesque, Greg Minar, who else was it? There was a few guys that got really screwed. Ollie's War, he was in the rain. And that track, like watching and knowing the feeling you get when you're at the top of a World Cup race run and you know people have gone down when it isn't wet, and then knowing you've got to race in the wet, you haven't practiced in the wet, the track's super difficult, super hard to ride in the wet, and because parts are so covered with trees, you get parts that are just bull dust, and then you go into icy corners which are out in the open. So pretty much everything in the open gets slippery and wet, everything that's hard packed and everything in the open, and then everything in the forest is still blown out dust bowls. So you're kind of balancing these two things of like, do I put wet tires on, do I keep dry tires on, and how do I push? Like, how do I push when stuff, it's kind of this mixture of like stuff's perfect, stuff's terrible, and stuff's blown out. So it's like you're kind of balancing these three different conditions in one run. So hats off to the guys that came down in the wet and actually like laid down good runs. Like I talked to some of the guys and they're like, I'm super happy with how I rode, but you're still just not going to be anywhere near the time when you've kind of got to deal with those conditions. So feel for those guys, but I'm glad the sun did come out. I'm glad that the guys actually had decent runs towards the end, and man, super exciting race to see how some of these guys threw down. I was pumped. Saw Troy, he did well. He was one of my picks, and just it seems like the lighter riders. And in saying this, I know Greg won world champs there a couple of years ago, and he's obviously one of the bigger riders. But just looking at the guys that do well there, it seems like the lighter you are, and the kind of more you can skim over stuff. You don't get so jacked up by all the big holes. You can kind of like skim over the top. Like you watch Jackson's run and he just bounces everywhere. Like he just bounces over stuff, and that's like the benefit of obviously being smaller. Troy's similar to that. Even Loris isn't the biggest guy either. It's like all these guys that are a bit smaller can seem to like bounce through stuff and don't get so like caught up in the bigger holes, which Val di Sole has tons and tons of them. So you see them and they're just so light, especially towards the end of the run. You see Jackson just looking so much more fresh than everyone else. Like he's still attacking and he's still just like flowing, where a lot of the other bigger riders and other guys, you see they get to the bottom, they fatigue, their body position changes, they start to ride more over the front, their elbows come out, and you can just tell like, oh man, you're tired. Like, and I know that feeling firsthand, how bad that is when you get to that point where you're like, okay, this is it's kind of like damage control autopilot kind of thing. But you see the guys that are fresh at the bottom and how much more they can attack and how much time they can actually make up, which is pretty cool to see. But my standout was definitely Thibaut de Preller's run. That was, man, I wanted him to win just because of how much he threw at that run and how many moments he had. Like if you watch his run back, the whole way down, you're just like, is he going to win or is he going to crash? Like, I'm pretty sure through one section, you do like a big step down and he like gets his back wheel kicked. And I'm pretty sure it hit a tree. I might try and find the clip and put it in, but his back end kicks out and it just like slaps a tree and then puts him straight again. And he just does not let off the gas at all. I was watching that and when the person that has the best run might not actually be the person that wins. And like, not to take away from Jackson's run, he was obviously smooth and clean and did the job, but just watching Thibaut's run, I was like, man, that's proper mountain biking. And you see at the end, he like rips his goggles off, and to quote Step Brothers, he had this crazy look in his eye. So I'm pretty sure at one point he said, "Let's get it on." But to see him come down and lay that down, and he obviously had a big moment towards the end where he lost a bit of time. So it would have been interesting to see how close to Jackson's time without that big mistake he would have been. Because they went back and forth the whole time. I think he had better splits at the top. I think he was the fastest at the top and maybe at the second one. And then Jackson pulled time back. And obviously, if you're going to push that hard and make those mistakes, it's all part of the racing. So I'm like not taking away from Jackson at all. But just to see those two have definitely, when they're both on, they've got like the speed to win. And Thibaut is one of those guys who will lay it down. Like he will throw down a really, really solid run. So definitely super exciting to see that. Loris Verger, he was the guy that came down very last. And I'm not sure if he just like, because he's qualified first before and he's won before. Like he did the same thing last year where he qualified first and then won. But just watching his run back and seeing it, he seemed, I don't know, he just seemed like he made all these little mistakes. Like he seemed like he was like over jumping stuff and hitting stuff and getting a bit swirly at the top. And I think that just kind of carried through his run. So kind of not really his MO. Like normally he's super clean, like consistent, just gets the job done. But he just seemed like he kind of overrode it a little bit in like compared to how he normally would. So a bit interesting, but he's kind of the silent assassin at the moment. Like he's still always just there, but he doesn't say a whole lot. He's not too loud. He's not too flashy, but he kind of just gets the job done. But that was cool to see him. I think what did he land? 5th, I'm pretty sure. So he landed 5th. Troy was 4th, which is cool to see him back up there. Finn Isles, he got 3rd. And another guy that's just like super consistent this year. Like I think he's found his rhythm. He knows what he's capable of. He knows what to do, and he's just kind of not riding above himself at the moment. Like he just seems to be finding his groove, finding his flow, and you see him in practice and he just looks super consistent. Doesn't look like he's overdoing it. Like I know in the past I think he would just come out swinging and just blow up, and now he's kind of like, all right, just take it back 10%, be smooth, consistent, and then build on that speed, and it seems to be working for him. So I think he's definitely one of the guys for like an overall, be right there for the overall. It's going to definitely it's going to be interesting as well, because the junior guys, obviously they've got the speed. Like Jackson's won, Jordan's already won this year. Like they're showing they've got that speed, but it's just going to be interesting to see how they can use that as the season goes on. Like I said it before in the last review after Leo Gang about maintaining that and having that pressure at the end of a season. When we saw with Jordan, he won the first race, and then we had the pressure of then having the leader's jersey and being number one, and he didn't do that well at Leo Gang. So it's like then he came to Val di Sole and didn't have that pressure, and then he still crashed, but he was sitting 3rd at the last split before, and he crashed on a bit that was right at the end of the track, slippery corner, like easy mistake. I don't think that was because of pressure or anything. I think that was just a racing incident, but it's going to be interesting to see as the season goes on and those guys are right at the pointy end, whether they could win an overall, whether that will play a factor. And like I was saying, how someone like a Loic or a Loris or something in that situation where the pressure's on, they can kind of deliver. So that's going to be super interesting to see how that all plays out and see how the junior guys kind of deal with that pressure in the future and where they go from there. So super interesting. But Valley Hole, she got another win. So she won at home soil and then she won here. She just seems like she's on a bit of a tear now, like just consistent, smooth, no real mistakes in a run, and just putting in like pretty big margins into people. So I think she's definitely got the momentum. But it's interesting to see she's actually not leading the overall. Like Cammy Blanche is leading, even though Valley's won 2 races. I think she was 4th at the first one, but Cammy's just been consistent, second. So it's interesting to not be leading the overall and you've won 2 World Cups, but that's kind of consistency's key here, and that's obviously paying off. So that was cool to see. Jess Blewett, she was in 3rd. That was cool to see her do super well here and kind of get on that 3rd place step. Marin, she's coming back as well. She was in 4th. She's been slowly building as well. She hasn't kind of had that all-out speed to run with the front, like Valley and Cammy for a while. She was definitely the one, like back in 2019, 2020, she was like the one to beat. And I don't know what's happened, but she's kind of just like still obviously got the speed, but not quite to that like winning race pace. So it's going to be interesting to see if she kind of keeps building this confidence with like a 4th here and a 3rd there, and then she might come out and just lay one down. So that was really cool. Nina Hoffman, she was in 5th again, just like building and consistent, which is cool to see. And I'm pretty sure Jess was, I'm not sure what her splits were, but I think she was sorry, I'm trying to look for something. Oh, and Rachel's still 3rd in the overall, and she's not even been to this one. Wonder if she will come back. No, it was Gracie crashed, and then she still had the fastest bottom split. So she was hauling at the bottom, and I saw she pulled back a heap of time, but I think if she didn't crash, she would have been right there as well. She looked like she had good speed and just super good bike control. Like when you watch her ride, like she's just, you can notice the girls that are fast and then the ones that are fast but then really controlled as well. Like there's ones that you watch and their speed's there, but they're on the edge a little bit, and then the ones that have really good bike control, really good jumping skill, like you notice they kind of stand out. So she's definitely one to look out for as well. But super interesting with the different kind of, it just seems like in all the categories, in the elite men and elite women, especially seeing there's been 3 different winners in 3 different races for the men, and the kind of elite women's podium keeps getting kind of jumbled around. It's like, it's cool. It's cool to see a lot of people can do well this year, and like they're definitely like shining through as well. So it's gonna be super interesting season. There's a massive break now, so there's a huge break about a month or so before World Champs in Fort William, which if I was to put my money on someone there, I'm thinking Laurie. I'm thinking Laurie Greenland. I reckon he's going to lay it down. I think he's got a lot of speed there. I think him, Tebow. Yeah, I'm thinking him or Tebow is going to be up there, or possibly even. I'm just trying to think. Like you've got to be. It's interesting that Fort William's such like. I feel like you have to be such a powerful rider, but then these smaller guys seem to be doing super well. Like you see Amaury, Greg, that kind of build. G, for example, have always done well there. But now, like Laurie did really well last year. Amaury's kind of been on charge, but obviously he won't be there this year because of the injury. Wish him all the best. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. Before we get out of here, kind of just rambling a little bit on this one. But if people have sent me some questions, I wrote a thing. What do you want to know about this race? So there's a few random ones. People asking about what the track was like. So asking if it was worse when it was blown out or when it rained. Honestly, when it's blown out, it's not that bad. It's hard to judge holes and stuff like that. But on the whole, you kind of know on the kind of hole as a track, you kind of know what you're getting. And some stuff pushes a bit wider, but you can kind of judge it. When it rains like that, like the roots are so slippery. The dirt's not too bad. The dirt in some spots where it's glossy, but where it's powder, it's actually not super bad because it kind of turns a bit pasty. But just the fact the roots are like snipers, and then you're dealing with that, and then you're going back to dust. So you just got the different conditions make it super, super hard to deal with. But yeah, it's just the constant change is the biggest thing to deal with there, because it's like you go from part of the track's perfect, parts slippery as hell, and then parts dusty. So it's just kind of adapting and working out how hard to push in each section. For the bottom jump, someone asks if it's actually that big in real life. It's not super big. It's just the speed you come off it. You're going so quick, and then also the fact that by that time you're so tired. Like for example, Joe Breeden blew his hand off. He landed, then hit a braking bump and blew his hand off, and somehow held on to it. He went over the berm and went to the four-cross track, but he survived, which was, you know, when you see something and you're just like, oh man, that could have been so much worse. So that was lucky for him. But yeah, it just shows you how rough the track is and how blown out your arms are. Guy asked me about whether arm pump is immune for downhill races. Definitely not for me. I definitely get it. But when I was teammates with Steve Smith, he said that he just never gets arm pump. Like it was never an issue that he had. So some guys magically don't get it. I've also talked to David Trummer, and he says he doesn't get any arm pump at all. So there is a few guys. I think it's a bit of a spectrum. I think people get it worse than other people, but you definitely see the people that probably don't get it normally do better at the bottom splits. Like David Trummer is someone that builds in his run, and that's the reason I asked him at Val di Sole last year. I'm like, dude, you always build. You always like start off not like terrible, but you might be 2 seconds down, and then you'll pull that back and be up at the end, where I would normally be the opposite. And he's like, oh yeah, I just never get arm pump. Always feel great at the bottom. So there are some guys out there that don't seem to deal with it. How is Ollie Davis looking? Ollie Davis is looking good. He was, I think he got 30th, or I think 30th in quali and then 32nd in the semi, so he just missed out in the finals. But definitely finding his own now and building into it and doing really well. So super proud of Ol. He's been someone I've helped out for a while now, and it's cool to see him over there just killing it. He's kind of on his own thing now. Like he was with the War Brothers when they were on Union, and now they've kind of like stepped away and got their own deals. He's kind of like fending for himself a little bit, but it's super cool to see him doing well now and finding his own feet and kind of having his own thing happening. So that's really cool. So I'm pumped with him. 3 of the biggest takeaways from the past 8 weeks. Biggest takeaways. Downhill can be tough sometimes, but we already knew that. Takeaways can be tough. Trying to stay focused on what you're doing. Like there had sometimes where I was going up in the gondola and my head was all over the place thinking about stuff, and then not long after that I managed to throw my head into the ground and have a pretty big crash. So just trying to stay focused on what you're doing, trying to have other thoughts come in and affect your mindset, and just when you're doing a job, focus on the job, don't focus on past, present, future, all this other stuff. Just, well, obviously focus on present, don't focus on past and future. So something that I definitely need to work on. And then just kind of like appreciating the moment of being over there and doing it. I definitely was trying to do that more, but there's sometimes when things are going wrong that you kind of get into a bit of a negative spiral in your own head about why it's happening. And I think it's just kind of like come back, take a breath, and realize it's all good. So it's another thing. What else we got? How physical was the track? was pretty bad, but again, comparing it to last year, it was nowhere near as bad as last year. So I guess when you got that comparison, it's not that bad. It's still obviously a super physical track. It's hard to kind of get, if you get out of flow, like a rhythm or a flow, it's hard to kind of get back into it because you don't have time to like breathe, reset. It's just like so full on, so much coming at you. There's like two spots, kind of the bridge at the top and then the big step down the middle are the two spots you can kind of chill and get your kind of breath and bearings back. But besides those two spots, you're pretty much on it the whole time. So definitely a lot for your brain to deal with and take on board. So it's a full on track. Most rims done in a weekend, 6. And they were all done on the first day. That was in Mont Saint Anne, not Val di Sole. But yeah, that was a big day. Why wasn't Remy Meyer-Smith disqualified? I don't know. He didn't really, he didn't cut the track. He just kind of went wide. I think there was no advantage made. He didn't really, he wasn't cutting the track. He almost crashed. And his front wheel kind of went over the top of the pole. It didn't really go, it kind of hit over it. And I think just the fact that it was not an inside or anything, he went wide, almost crashed, almost went into a spectator and then kind of turned over the pole. I guess they looked at it that, he's not making time and he's not, it's a tricky one. I'm glad he didn't. He had a good run. He was riding good all weekend, built some confidence. We don't want to disqualify people, especially for that kind of stuff when it's it's just a tricky one. I know it's hard because then it's how far do you go with that? And if people are oh well, I just ran it over, but you ran it over to the inside and you missed some holes, and it does get a bit of a grey area. But yeah, it's tricky. I'm glad he didn't. Remy's doing super well. He looked good in practice all week and just building that confidence, and I hope he just continues to build on that. I know him and his brother Luke, they're guys that will throw everything at it, and sometimes that's not the best approach because then you can have that crash and that setback and it can kind of dent the confidence, then you got to rebuild again. So it's he's got this momentum. It's just keep chipping, keep building, and then eventually you'll be there and you're oh man, this is just the norm now. This isn't out of the ordinary, me being on the podium or top 10 guy consistently. So definitely got a bright future for both those guys. But yeah, it's cool to see Remy laying it down and actually staying on the bike, which is cool. What else we got? What is my approach towards riding the Val di Sole track? Is it scary to ride? It's not really scary. It's just a lot to take on mentally going into it. So I think you just kind of got to build into it. I don't think you want to come out swinging first run and throw yourself at the ground. The track changes so much, which is also really good. So you do your first run and then the lines can change for the second. You kind of constantly, because it's evolving so much, which I talked about this previously, what I think is really good for a downhill track, because it's constantly changing. You're constantly changing your lines, your speed, your approach, everything's, it's you're building with as the track's building. So it's for example, Leo Gang's second run, it was a race run and you're already scared about the speed, where Val di Sole, by the end of the first day, you've got your race speed, but then the lines are changing, so you got to kind of check that, and then you're kind of adjusting as you go and you're building through the weekend. Where a track like Leo Gang or even Lenzerheide to a certain extent, it was pretty much second, third run, you're okay, this is race pace, and then the lines don't really change from there. You just stay on that one and just keep pushing that limit. And I think that's how when it gets a little bit dangerous. Was the track freshened up? Was it track refreshed up to scratch for World Cup? I think it was good. They did put a lot of dirt in. I think I said this in the past though, I just don't think you need to put so much dirt in. You kind of just need to alter it to go different ways, which they did in spots, which was really good. But I think just filling dirt over the top of stuff, it doesn't always work. I think it's we just need new tracks. But again, they've kind of set it up so they have it for TV. They've cut trees down so the viewing's better. There's certain things that it's hard to change. I think I'm just I don't want to say old school because I haven't been doing that long, but you used to go to a same location and they'd have a completely new track, so you get used to that, and then when they go somewhere and don't change it, it becomes come on, there's so much hill here, there's so many spots to go. So yeah, I think that's good. When's the next Froth TV? I don't know. I need to get him on to do a podcast. I think it would be really cool. Put up a little clip. Everyone seems to appreciate Joshy Frother. He's just having a good time. He's having fun. So no, definitely want to chat to him more and yeah, get him on the pod and make a little episode out of that. But yeah, it definitely gets me hyped up when I'm around him. So yeah, good kid, good energy, and good person to be around. I'm probably just going to call it at that. Compare this year to previous years. comparing it to last year, I guess, like I said, this track was just destroyed last year, but it was, I don't know, it was weird because even just going there, because it was the last World Cup last year, it was kind of like almost just like trying to get over the line. Like, you know, when it's like you're so close to the end that you're just like, we're almost there. Like, we've had a big block of racing, you're tired, you kind of just want to get it done. So it was funny going there this year and not having that feeling of just like, oh, like we're almost there, just one more race kind of thing. So it was cool going there without that kind of feeling of just like, just get through it kind of thing. So, and then just the fact the track was easier made it a lot better. But I feel like I'm rambling at the moment, but it'd be good to do this straight after the race, more or less. I feel like I'm trying to like remember things and pick stuff apart about it. But yeah, all in all, pretty epic race. Epic to see the direction it's going and the speed everyone's going, and like how it's all kind of elevating. And yes, see the young guys coming up. It seems like it's become a young man's sport. Like, just with how many young up and coming kids seem to be flying now and don't seem to care for their safety. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out and see who's on top at the end. But yeah, big break now. I'll try and do more of these. I'm going to do one soon as well about selection for world champs and certain things and things I think about. So yeah, I'm going to stop rambling and you guys can stop looking at my head. See you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace.